Hey everyone, welcome back to our Spring Security series. In our last video, we explored how to set up Spring Security using JDBC authentication. If you haven't checked that out yet, make sure to watch it first. The link is in the description below. Today, we are diving into something even cooler, JSON Web Token or JWT, and comparing it to the JDBC authentication method that we discussed last time. Let's quickly recap on what we did last time with JDBC authentication if you're not familiar. All right. So far what we have seen is what is Spring Security? Why do we need to secure our application, right? And then we looked at a basic filter and we learned about authorization authentication. And then we took some of the users from application.yaml where we could define only one user. We moved them into in-memory database, and from in-memory we learned how to transfer them into PostgreSQL, right? Then we tried to encrypt the username and password and we added a custom exception. Now we're going to extend that same application that we have built so far, and now we're going to add JWT in that to solve some of the problem that the current solution is not going to solve. Okay, so let's start with Spring Boot 3 and JWT. So before we begin, again we need to understand what we're going to learn, what is the outcome, why you're watching this video, right? So at the end of this video, you would be able to understand what is JWT, what is the problem it solves, and what is wrong with the traditional approach. Because people have been using database and simply using servlets and filters to use authorization. What is wrong with that approach? Then we're going to look at what does a JWT structure look like, how to create a JWT, and how to implement JWT security in Spring Boot. So what is JWT? Obviously. So JWT is, again, I've been calling it out again, JSON Web Token. That's what it stands for. And JSON Web Token, it's a standard for securely transmitting information between parties as JSON object. And it is compact, URL safe, and can be digitally signed or encrypted. Now, don't worry about this if it's not making sense. You can look up RFC 7519, what it entails. I'm not going to go into that detail, but we're going to understand this whole thing with a very, very simple example. Okay, so just bear with me. So why do we need JWT today, right? So in our previous example, in a previous video, as we had seen how when we are doing a traditional database approach, right, where we save the username password into the database and extract that. So here again, when the user logs in, the call comes to the server, and from server it goes to the database. Validate where the validation of the username and password happens, and if a user is valid, then the values goes and get saved into the session in the cookies. And then on the server side, you also have to maintain some form of record that the cookie ID is matching with my user who has already authenticated, right? So you have to store that. The problem with that is that sessions have to be stored in memory, and which can increase the load drastically in distributed system. We're going to see that why with a simple example. And then it can also lead to forbidden requests in multi-device setup. You know, these days you have been seeing that you can log in into Gmail from one account and can have access that same account over mobile, over television, and multiple devices, right? So you can run into the course issue, and then CSRF overriding of session is very, very, very common. That typically happens. So these are some of the issue which you will see with the traditional one. Now let's understand with a simple example. Okay, so in the database approach, if I'm going to deploy that, now I would prefer to deploy um, uh, application on node 1 where it has its own cache, because again, remember, in the microservices world standard, you want to make sure that every application has its own cache. But the problem with this approach is, imagine a client comes in and my load balance is set up on round robin, for example, and the first request lands on node 1, user is validated, and the value is cached. Now when the user tries to move from screen to screen, sometime his request may land on node number 2, and node number 2 is going to look up the cache and say, hey, I don't find this person's ID, I don't have a record of this, must be on node 1, but I don't have access to that. So in that case, the call will go to the database, which is an expensive call, and you don't want that, right? So to fix that particular approach, what are you going to do, right? you would have to use some form of sticky IP or risk DB lookup, which is pretty expensive, right? The other way, somebody can come back and say, hey, rather than having a distributed cache and having a local cache for each of these node, let's have a common cache where both node 1 and node 2 are going to look up the cache. But the problem with this approach is now you have a single point of failure. What happens if your cache goes down? Say you're using Redis cache or some form of cache out there, and that server goes down, all the calls will be going to the database, right? So this is also not a secure way of implementing the solution. So this is why we have the challenges of scaling up in our session, right? And how does JWT work? So in JWT, what happens is a user logs in with their credential, and the server issues them a token back to the client, and the client stores that token on its side, and this token is actually signed. So if somebody tries to fake it or tries to change that, the signature is not going to match. And when the client is now ready to make an actual call to access one of the resources, he's going to pass that token, and server doesn't have to do a lookup in the database. All it has to do is, you have given me a signature, now I just need to verify what is the signature and make sure that signature matches, that it is a valid signature that has been created. And that way you are saving an expensive call, and this becomes stateless. So now I don't care, I have one node or 100 nodes, each of these nodes are not going to do any sort of lookup in the database. All of that information is contained within the JWT token itself. So JWT has couple of parts which you're going to see, and it also contains all of the information needed for that particular customer, both the authentication and authorization. So what is the difference between JWT and traditional database approach? So let's explain, let's understand this with a simple example. Okay, so imagine you have a county fair in your city, and you have a ticket booth, and you have a lot of security officer, and you are very fond of rides. So you come and buy a ticket from the ticket booth. Okay, you pay the money, you get the ticket, and now each of the ride that you're going to do, you have to go to the security officer where he has a record book, and he's going to check, okay, your ticket number is 1001, and now I have to search for the that particular ticket number in my record book. Think of that as a database, right? Database or cache. And if he finds it, he's going, the person can now go and write the ticket. Same way, now he has to go to the second ride. Same procedure happens. The security office is going to validate that the ticket is valid in a logbook, and then if it is valid, then he is going to go and do the rides. And in between, if your user has to go and say bring a bottle of water which he left in the car, he has to again go and validate that ticket for each of the ride with the officers, or he may have to just buy a brand new ticket, right? So this has an issue, as you can see, because if the security officer is going to check the ticket every single time, imagine the line that is going to be formed, right? So where I'm going with this is that if you're going to do that with the traditional database, it is going to be much slower. If your traffic increases, yes, you can use cache, but even that becomes expensive over time. And also a cache is going to grow, right? Say you have a certain spike, and your cache is say limited to say 100 MB is what you're saving. So as the users are going to come in at every 100 MB, as the cache is full, eviction policy is going to kick in, and the last known cached value is going to be thrown out. So again, the calls are going to go back to the database. So which is why the line is going to increase, or the time is going to increase. So how does JWT solve this problem? So again, we are going to look at our fairground example, where you have a fairground, and again you have one security officer, or you can have a multiple security officer, right? So again, you are very enthusiastic, you want to go and ride your ticket, but this time, instead of having a ticket, you are issued a wristband, and wristband has your name, it has a barcode in there, and the security officer has the scanner, and he can just look at, or you can just scan at the security officer counter, and it'll be valid. You don't have to go and the security officer doesn't have to go and look at that particular information. All he's checking is, okay, is the band valid? If it is valid, they can go and do the writes. So the problem with the approach of regular ticket is that if you lose your ticket, you again have to go back to the booth, buy a ticket, and then come and again get yourself verified in the record book of the security officer. That's an issue. Somebody can come and create a fake ticket, right? Say they found the ticket which you missed in the previous step, and can go and ride on your behalf. That becomes a problem, and again it's a slower process. But the advantage of using wristband approach or the jot approach is it is secure and hard to fake, right? If you have a 3D mark on your wristband, it is very difficult to fake that, right? And it is fast and efficient because wristband quick can be quickly tapped and instantly verifying your info and reducing your time. And this wristband is always with you. Even if you go out for a certain amount of period, you can come back in and your wristband can be verified, because that wristband is only valid for that particular day. So think of this: if you're going in some form of disc or a bar, right? They typically do those invisible stamp, and then they look at with the UV light that you still have that. And next day, if you come in, the mark is probably washed off, or the date that they have on that mark is expired. It's a very similar approach. So what does a JOT structure look like? So JOT has three parts to that. One is header, one is payload, and one is signature. And what goes in the header? It contains two information. It contains the algorithm type which is being used, and what type of token is being used. In this case, it is always JWT. Okay. And there are two type of algorithm. One is HMAC and second is RSS. So HMAC is a symmetric key approach, where you have a single shared private key. It is fast and good between trusted parties. So if you know that who you're going to be sharing the information with, it's a pretty good approach. So think of it as you have created a front-end application which is supposed to call your back-end application. Both the parties know each other in this case, right? This is a very crude example, so don't call me out on this. If you're a better one, please go ahead and add it into the comment box. And RSA is asymmetric key, public and private key. This is slow but good between untrusted parties. So one good example is, say you are only providing a backend service via an API gateway, and your clients can basically use your API or microservice, and they can create their own front end. So in that case, you don't know who is going to be using that. So RSA can be a good approach over there. The second is the payload, and what goes in payload is simply a JSON key value pair. They like to call it as claims, and there are three type of claims. One is called reserved, second is public, and the third is private. So what goes in reserved? So in reserved, if you look at RFC 7519, I'll show you shortly. It has a set of 3-digit key names, like ISS is issued, IAT, when was it issued, it's a timestamp, and who is the subject, and the issuer name that goes in as ISS, right? So it has those predefined set of value which you can use. Those are called reserved claims. Just like any of the language, like if you're using Java, you know that the string or main are string or integer are predefined keyword. You cannot reuse those to create a variable name. So just like that, these are the reserved keyword that you should not be using for any other purposes. What is public claim? So public claim should have a URL based namespace, or not a, if not a URL based, some sort of namespace. And so one example which I put in is, say you want to put in that your site is called example.com, and you are going to be putting information for user ID, that my user ID is coding at Danny, and I have authorization, or my role type is equal to XYZ, and so on and so forth, right? So if you want to define those, or you also want to add user ID and the company ID or the customer ID, all those sort of information, you want to put them in the namespace. And then they have some private as well. So private is also like public, but in the private one, you have a set of keyword which only the client and server understand, that they have an agreement on. For example, say I'm building a payment type API, and in that API I have told my customer in the documentation that they can pass a product ID or the origin ID which they want to keep at their end, or say they want to use something called tracking ID, or correlation ID that they want to put in, and the server also understand that they can expect those values. So those are sort of private IDs which both server and client have an agreement on, and they can pass this value. And you again, you if you want to differentiate between them, between the public and private, you can use something like internal dot, but it is not required, right? Typically what goes in the private, an example would be uh, uh, roles. For example, right, I have predefined roles as, say, admin and a user and a manager, just like we have been seeing in our previous example, right? So if we want to use something of that sort, I can go ahead and push that value in the uh, private. And if you look at the claim side, most of the time, um, I have seen that users typically don't use the namespaces, which is not a good practice. You should always provide some form of namespace. If not a URL, please add some form of ID, like say one of my customer is, say, XYZ. I'll simply add XYZ slash whatever the user ID is, right? But you should always add namespace in there. And what is a signature? So signature is basically a base 64 coded header plus payload that is secured by a private key that is on the server side, and that is the key which it uses to make sure that the signature which has been created is actually correct one. And we're going to see an example shortly, right? All right, so now let's take a look at the what does a JWT token looks like. We're going to explore what happens when I change this value, right? So for example, if you go to the website jwt.io, okay, you can either click on the debugger over here, or you can just scroll down and you'll see. So you'll see that it's using HS256. You can change the algorithm time there. These are all the different values. I'm just going to stick to the first one that is showing up, HS256. And this is the default token that has been created for me. Okay, so now if somebody steals the token, or they try to fake this particular token, it's, if you see at the end it says signature verified, right? Say I change this value to T, you'll see that this signature becomes invalid. How is that happening? It's happening because it is using a secret key to encode that particular value, as we had seen earlier, right? So let's understand what are the different type of headers which you can pass in there. What are the different reserved claims that you can pass in the payload, right? So let's look at the RFC 7519. So you can just do a search for this. I just went RFC 7519, and in here you can see list of all the different registered claims. So IS is for issuer, SUB for subject, audience, expiration time, not before claim, issued at GTA. So these are all registered claim, right? And in the public claim, again you have all it asks you is to provide the namespace type, and same way for private claim, it simply telling you that, hey, make sure that you have an agreement between the client and the server, right? There are also some more different type of headers that have been provided, called TYP for type, CTY for content type, and there are like a lot more in there that you can look at. There is one more page I forgot, I could not find that page earlier. I think it's showing up over here, where you can basically go um, oh, IANA, yeah. So I can go and look at the IANA JSON algorithm, and then JSON Web Signature. One of these site has a long list of values in there. Okay. Anyway, you can go and look at the INA, or you can just go and search that value. So let's search IANA. Um, oh yeah. So here is a complete list of JSON Web Token claims, right? It has a issuer one, blah blah blah, and then these are the standard one which you can use as a part of the public or private claim. But make sure if you're making it a public, make sure you're adding some form of namespaces over there, and these are pre-defined. Now you can go outside this list, but most of the time you will end up using one of these, right? Or you can create one of your own. So let's go ahead and try and create a brand new token, because over here I could not go and add information on the right hand side because I only have this token over here, right? So now I have this. I just went and searched for creating an JWT token online to show you how it works. So here I've filled in some of the information. Issuer, issued at, expiration, audience, subject, and here I've added the claim, public claim as acme.com, and I provided user is Johnny, same way public email is jrocket at something something, role is equal to admin. This is the private claim where there's an agreement between the use client and the server that the different type of role associate are user, manager, and admin. So in my case, Johnny is an admin, and this is how the JSON is actually going to look like, right? And here is a random key which I created. So I'll just go and create another one. Okay. And then I'll just go and create that. So now when I copy this, and now I want to see that what in this token, when a user passes this to my server after the authentication has happened, right? Is this how is this server going to get the information from it? So as you can see, it got that information, but it is complaining that signature is invalid. Why is the signature invalid? Signature is invalid because if you see here, I haven't provided the right key over here. So when a server is going to be validating, right, the before it extract the value within the JSON, it has to validate whether the token is valid or not. And if it is invalid, it is not, it is simply going to throw away whatever is in here, right? To make sure that this is invalid, I am going to go and get my key from here, and as soon as I put this key in, you'll see signature is equal to verified. So this is how the token creation and token verification happens. And one of the question that when I was trying to learn this, hey, in this whole thing, where is my password? How is that actually happening? So we're going to learn all of that. But one thing you need to remember is that um, if you are writing the code for creating the jot or issuing a jot, make sure that you are not also adding the password in here, because if you add the password in here, anybody who gets your token from here, right? So let's say I'm going to dump this value. Okay, anybody can come, and I'm going to remove this. Okay, so even without the value, somebody can just take your token, come over here and try to see, okay, oh, some you also provide the password in here, so they can go and log in on your site. So make sure you're not adding any sort of private or publicly identifiable information or PI information, or any sensitive information like your SSN number or your home address and phone number and stuff, right? Make sure you are not providing any of those sensitive information over here. So let's move ahead now. All right. So I think I already covered this briefly, but let's look at how to use JWT security and what not to do when you're having that. So one is verify the signature before extracting the claim. So this is if you're writing the server side of the code, don't just extract the value as is, because as you saw, I can get the information from the token as is, but I need to make sure that the information which is in there is actually valid one. Nobody has basically stolen that and dumped it or change something like that. So you need to make sure that the signature is valid before you extract the claims. um, always secure your secret key, right? Don't just check in as a part of your GitHub. If it's a public code, make sure you are keeping it in a secure place. Make if it is supposed to be on the server side, make sure it is under a secured folder. Avoid passing any sensitive data. Please do not. If you're on writing the server side code and you're creating the signature backend, setting some of the values in the token, make sure you're not passing the password as well. Okay. And not only password, sensitive information like your SSN and any other PIN information which you don't want your hackers to see. And to prevent the relay attacks, now one of the issues with the JWT token is if you do not provide an expiration date, that token will be valid forever and ever. And when that happens, your token can be stolen and can be used, and it is very difficult to throw away that token if it has been saved somewhere on the client side. That token will not expire. So make sure that you are providing an expiration time, and you're also putting the IAT. I think I wrote it as EAT. Record the time when the token was issued. Okay. And have a random or nuance as well. Now let's understand the Spring security flow, how it's going to work out in JWT. So as a part of the Spring security flow, whenever a client is going to come in, this is where you'll solve it out. If you have like, okay, I didn't see where the username and password are going in, right? So username and password are coming in from the browser or from the client side, as we have seen earlier. That process is not going to change. They are going to pass you the username and password, and when they pass that username and password, so I'm looking at the section over here, right? If they're going to pass the username and password, what the server is going to do is it is going to say that, okay, I see that you have passed me username and password, you haven't provided any token. So it's going to go back to the database, verify that the username and password is valid, and then is going to create a JWT token for you. And in that JWT token, it is going to put in that username, coding with Danny. If I want to also pass in the email of that and what sort of roles, it's going to create a JSON like structure, sign it and send it back to the client. Now when the client want to say access any of the resources, say now it wants to get a list of books, for example, the client is going to be passing the token that has been issued, the JWT token that has been issued by the server. It's going to save it on its sides on the cookie, for example, and it's going to pass that value to the Spring Boot controller, and Spring Boot controller is going to validate that JWT using the secret key that the Spring is going to be saving in application.yaml. Application.yaml, or ideally in production you should be passing that as a part of command line argument, not saving in application.yaml. But for our simplicity, imagine that value is part of application.yaml. So it is going to look at that key and is going to make sure that the token which you have provided me first, is it valid? If it is valid, then it is going to extract the claims like username and whatever information I've dumped in, and then is going to allow the user to access a particular resource. If somebody has tampered with the token, or the token has been is expired, right, then in that case it is going to validate the token and simply going to tell the customer that the token is not valid. Okay, so this is the whole flow, and now that you understand everything on why we need a JWT token, what problems it solve, what are the problems faced if you're just using simple JDBC based or authentication, how JWT enhances your life. Let's understand how to add it into our code. It's very simple, and I'll be showing you example in very short bites of code and adding it in, and we'll see how the flow is going to look like. So before we begin, I want to make some small changes here and refactor the code. Okay. So we're going to go into a security config, and what you see over here is we are going to we have defined that all of these request matcher, and we have defined what sort of rules are these, right? So this is good. It still works, but I want to see whenever I'm landing on my controller classes, I want to see that whether there is any sort of authentication required on this method or not. I don't want to be going back and forth between my controller classes and my security config class, right? So over here, what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and comment it out, and I'm simply going to put this any request equal to authenticated. Okay. Now, where are we going to put these values instead? So I want to put all of these values in my REST controller. That's because in Spring, it has a very neat annotation that can tell me whether a particular REST call is actually going to be authenticated, and if it is, then what sort of roles I'm required. So I'm going to use the add pre-authorize annotation, and over here, as soon as you type pre-authorize, it knows that this method, if called whenever you access slash employee, just like we had over here, if this method has a pre-authorize, it means that this has to be going through authentication. Okay, and it should have a role of employee, manager, and admin. Okay, so I need to go ahead and add all of these in every method which I want to pre-authorize. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the get mapping by ID also, and this will remain the same because it should be accessible by employee, manager, admin. Again, if you have not seen the previous video, please go ahead and watch that, so that you understand what exactly is happening and what we just did. So right now, what the code that I have is a simple JDBC authentication and authorization code, and I'm simply refactoring the code. I haven't started any JWT implementation yet. I'm just refactoring the code so that it becomes clearer and you are able to follow through easily when I make the JWT specific changes. Okay, so now that I've added everything, I need to make sure that delete employee is the last one. Yes, so this change is also added. So now all of my code is added. So now to make sure that this pre-authorize is recognized, I need to go ahead in my config class and add another annotation called enable method security, which will make sure that this is getting picked up. Okay. So let's go ahead and validate that after my code is refactored, everything is working properly. So I have this Mary who is the admin, and she should be able to make all the changes. So now I'm going to go back to John, who is an employee, and need to make sure that he is not able to create I can see that forbidden is still working, but if it is Mary, she would be able to add the code, add the new employee, right? So this looks fine, and my code changes are looking good now. Now I need to make sure that in my security config, as you can see, I've already specified that CSRF is disabled, right? And we are doing a REST type of call where, or it could be a front end as well. Now, because we're using JWT, we don't need any sessions at this time, especially for this, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to make session management as stateless. So we are going to put in session management, and for this given session, we are going to say session security policy. We're going to put this as stateless. And let me fix everything. So this looks good. This is the first change you're going to make over here. Now the first thing we need to do is we have to add some dependencies, and these dependencies are for JWT. So we're going to add two dependencies, One is the JOT, one for JOT and one for the IMPL. So it goes with IO JSON Web Token, and you can actually go and look it up in Maven repository. What other, and don't have to follow me, watch me typing here. And then we are going to add an API and the IMPL. Okay, so we have added these, and I'll just say make sure that it is getting pulled in. I'll stop the server before I start. Now what I need to do is I am going to be creating a utility function, and it's not going to be doing anything. All I'm trying to do is for my flow, I have to use different method, one for validation, one for token creation, all of those, right? So I'm going to be creating a utility method. I'm going to be using that in my service classes. And one other thing that we're going to add is we are going to add the secret that we're going to use and the application time. Remember, always provide when your token is supposed to expire. So here you can give a random secret, keep it as random as possible. So I'm just going to be typing some junk over here. You can choose whatever else you want, add numbers and stuff you want. So go ahead and add that. And the time, make sure that it is in millisecond. So I added some numbers as well, as you can see, right? So JWT expression in milliseconds. So remember, 1000 millisecond is equal to 1 second. So I'll just give 36 second over here. You can give as long as you want. Okay, so depending on your use case, you can give 1 minute, you can give 1 hour, you can give 8 hour, you can give full day. That's up to you depending on a use case. All right, so we have added these, we have added the secret, and now we are going to add a utility class. So I'm going to create it in the JWT folder, and I'm going to call this as JWT utils. Let's make this implement serializable. And now let's think what are the different methods we are going to need. Okay, so we're not going to write any code first, we're going to put our thoughts here. So right now what I want to do, I want to get the secrets and any sort of expiration claims, whatever is coming in, right? Then we need a few methods, one for adding a method to get the token from the header, right? So let's add it, add a method to get JWT details from incoming headers. So header has, whenever a call has happened, we have to look at the JWT details from the header. Basically, we are simply getting that random key which we saw, right? And we have to get all of that information before we try to decode and extract all of that. So we have to get that. Then we need to make sure to decode that whatever is in there. We have to get our signing key that we just added, the random bunch that we added in the application.yaml. So we're going to add that, add as a method for getting the signing key. Let me go ahead and change this so that the next comments I'm going to add will make more sense. So we want to add a method to get JWT token from the headers. So right now we're just getting the random values that gets created when we create a token, the header, payload, and the signature. Okay, so if the header is valid, and we have, and then what we want to do is we want to extract the values. Remember, we saw the ISS type, audience type, subject, and all of those, right? So those are the stuff which you want to extract. And so we're going to add a method for extracting the value. Then we also need to make sure that when a new user come in for the first time, or whenever he's logging in, right? Of course, token won't be there. So what he'll be presenting? He'll be presenting his username and password. So when token is not present and user want to do a sign in, we have to first validate his token and then extract the values from the database. In this case, it'll be its username or any other value, roles and stuff. We are going to add that in the payload and create a JSON token out of that. Okay, and we have to add one more method, that we need to make sure that the token is valid, right? So before we go ahead and start extracting value, we need to make sure that when we extract the token from the header, one, it is not expired, two, token is valid, then we'll extract the value from the token. Okay, so let's go ahead and add serializable serial version over here, serial UID. So give it some random series of numbers. So I'm going to provide a long series of number and make sure that it is of type long. So I'll add 3424 148 4068787342 some number. Okay, so you can add that. Now let's go ahead and start adding creating method for all of these. Remember, this is only a utility class. We are going to use these methods in our service classes, right? So first thing, we need to get the value of the secret. So we're going to use the add value annotation and pull it from the Spring App jot secret. So we're going to keep the name as, and we're going to make a copy so that we can also get the jot expiration time in milliseconds. So we're going to change that jot expiration in milliseconds. This is why I love IntelliJ ID, right? It's like coding in Ferrari. Everything just starts showing up automatically for me. All right, so we have the jot secret and the expiration time in millisecond. Now what do we need to do? The first method we're going to create is a method to get the value of the jot from the header, and that we are going to get the values from HTTP request. Okay, so we're going to name this as get jot details from header, and this is coming from the HTTP servlet request, and we're going to call this as request. So we've added this, and now from the request we want to get the bearer token. So we're going to call this as bearer token, because in the header, remember, it will be coming as bearer space and some value, right? So the header key is authorization. So we are going to get the header key authorization. For that, the value will be bearer something something over there, right? So if the bearer token is not null or empty, then what do we want to do? We want to make sure that the bearer token, so bearer token, remember, should always start with bearer, right? So we are going to make sure bearer space and then the value. So we're just making sure that this is the exact starting of the token and the value is actually coming in. If it is present, then what do we want? We don't want the word bearer token, right? We want the value after the space. So bearer space and then the value, and that count, if you see, that is equal to 7. So we're going to say get this substring 7. For that, if bearer token is null or it doesn't match it, then just return null value. In that case, some form of exception will be thrown over there that the token is invalid. So we're going to add all of that when we start adding our exception in our service classes. Next, we want to get the signing key, and signing key. So the signing key which we have added, right, the random key, it's a string. So we have to convert that into the format that HMAC understand, right? So if you remember, on the jot.io there was a section which said that base 64 encoded and blah blah stuff, right? So we have to make sure that we are trying to decode the value in a similar format. So we are going to create a key bytes and decode as base 64. Why is this not coming in? I need to check it out. So we're going to debug, but right now let's try and pull this in. So the values are not coming. So we got this jot secret and the values are still not showing up. So maybe I need to do a Gradle clean build. Usually ID, when I click on that, click on the Gradle sign, it should pull automatically. I can see the values are correct, but it is not able to pull it in. Let me see if I import io.json web token. Okay, so it's not showing up. It means that this library is actually not getting pulled in. Let me comment this out, and let's go ahead and let's go and check it out in the terminal. Let's try and add the Gradle clean because I don't see the elephant sign of the Gradle where I can do that. So let's try it out from the command line and make sure that I'm able to pull this value in. So I can see that the build has failed, which means that it is not able to find this information. And everything looks good over here, but it's still not showing up. So Java security key. All right, so it's possible that I may have misspelled something. Let's see, should it be JWT hyphen API or two J's? Let's look at my Maven repository. So I have the another screen open where I'm just looking up the Maven repository, and the name looks correct to me, and the package name is also correct. It is JSON Web Token. And if you're coming from a different language, right? And I know this is I'm doing it in Java, but you can go on the jot.io and it'll tell you all the package name and everything that you need to pull in. So I'm looking at jot.io and this looks correct. I see. So the issue is that I haven't provided the version number and it's not able to uh, figure it out automatically in Gradle. So let me quickly search on Google and find the Maven repository, and I'm going to put in the value for Jot API. So the right now the version is 0.12.6. So if you are watching sometime in future, make sure you are actually using the right version, right? By the time you might be watching after it, the version would have changed. So make sure you're always updating this. So let's do a great clean build again, and this time it should pass. So let's see, 78%, and looks like it went through because it is going past the test cases. And now I should be able to pull this, import these requirement decoders, right? There you go. It got pulled in automatically, which is awesome. Okay, so let's proceed. So we did the decoding of jot secret. It was in the string format. So we have added that. And next we want to do is we want to return this particular value as key. Okay, so we're going to do keys dot hmac sha key for key bytes. So nothing fancier. This is just a standard, okay, to return the key value. Next, so now we have got the token, we have got the key. Now we need to validate the token. So we're going to write the method for validating the token. So whatever we are doing in sequence, right? This is for a user who already has a token. So what did we first do? We first got the token, then we got its key, and now we want to validate that token. Okay, so we are going to take the token that has come in, bearer space and whatever the name, and let's go ahead and add an info so that okay, I need to add two more things. I need to make this as a component, and I need to add slf4j. Okay, so I added the slf4j, and now I can go ahead and add the component as well, because we're going to be injecting this in our service classes. So in my log.info, I want to make sure that whenever I'm executing the code, if I have to debug somewhere, I want to make sure what token came in, right? So at this time, I'm simply going to put in validating token and whatever the token name is, and I've provided a placeholder, and we're just going to put the value of jot token as is. Okay, so and now we're going to use the JWT parser class, JWTS class, and we're going to parse the token, and we have to verify that with what? With our signing key. Okay, so we have our signing key, and we need to put in the secret key over here because we need to convert that, right? So we have added that, then we're going to build it. So, and once it's done, we have to make sure that we are able to parse sign claim. We have added the jot token. So this looks correct. If this goes fine, then we are going to return true. Otherwise, we are simply going to return false. Okay. And because we have added the try, what are things that can go wrong? That is, somebody passed us some malformed JWT exception. So we're going to add that as an error, that JWT token is invalid, and we're going to print that token, that this is the token which is invalid. What other things can go wrong? A token can be invalid, a token can may not be present, a token has an expired time, right? So all these are the different exceptions. So we're going to go ahead and catch all of those exceptions, because if you're just going to catch as a generic exception, right, you will not know what went wrong, right? So we want to make sure we are catching all of the exceptions and putting it in. So second exception which we are adding is the expired JWT exception. So we are simply going to put in that my JWT has expired, and we are actually going to see this right now. I've put in as 36 second, right? We are going to reduce that time, and we're going to see that this particular exception is thrown actually, right? Next one is called the unsupported JWT exception. So we are also going to put this value in. So this will happen if your JWT exception, remember the first part where you have the type where we put in as JWT. If you can go back to the screen where I was showing the JWT.I, the first thing was type, right, and the algorithm type. So if somebody provide anything other than JWT, that unsupported JWT exception is going to throw up, and this is the illegal argument exception where the claims may be empty. So you need to make sure that claims are provided. Okay, so so I've added return true. So now I'm just going to add return false. So if the token is not valid, one of the exception will be logged, and we're simply going to return the value as false. So at this time, my token has been validated. So now because my token is valid, now I'm ready to extract the values from the token. So what do you do with this after extracting? Your user is authenticated, and what are you going to do with it? So one of the thing that you would have seen is when you are past the login page, typically on the right hand side somewhere on the top, they add your username, your image, avatar, and all of those, right? So those can be part of that token, and you can use that to pass it to the next page, your landing page, index page, or whatever, right? So in our case, say I want to show the employee details, right? I can take that username, image, and whatever else I've passed, and I can show it as the value on the page to make it more customized, right? Okay, so now to extract the username, so this piece will remain exactly the same, right? Because I have to extract the value, I have to provide the signing key. So just like I've added the signing key up till here, the code is going to be same up to line number 66. And now I'm going to get the payload, get the subject, right? And I'm simply going to return that particular value. Up to this point, we have coded that a user has a JWT token, and these are the 4 methods I need. Now what happens is I have a user who is going to sign in and has to get the token. Okay, so for that we are going to use the Spring Security user detail, which is supposed to have the username and password over here. Okay, so this method, we are expecting that user on the screen, if they're coming from a say web UI, they are going to be passing a username and password. So we have to get the username, and somewhere along the line we have to make sure that we are tokenizing, we're creating a JWT token. So JWT token provides the pre-built method subject. My subject is username, and I'm signing with whatever my signing key that I provide, right? So I have to sign with the same key and unsign and extract the value and validate using the same signing key which I provide my application.yaml. And make sure that you are providing expiration in there. If you're only doing for development purposes, right, it's fine to skip this, but for production, make sure you're going to be providing the expiration time, right? So I'm going to simply add the Java util date, and I'm saying that expiration time is from current time plus 36,000 millisecond, that is 36 seconds. I don't know why I picked up 36 seconds, but that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so you have added the expiration, and for some reason this is showing me an error. We'll figure it out shortly what went wrong. So at this time, we are going to also be providing when this token was issued from my start time and the expiration time, right? So I'm going to be providing the same thing, my current time in millisecond over here. So system dot current millisecond, and it is still showing me an error. So something must be wrong. Let me just finish this. So I'm going to create a compact, and if you want to add in any sort of additional claims, you can go ahead and add it over. It has a method called dot claims also. Okay, so if you see it has a method called dot claims, you can go ahead and add whatever else claim. If you have any private claim, you can go ahead and add those, right? So I'm just going to add this. So if you are following the code and checking out from GitHub, and you just want to use the exact same code but you have additional claims, you can go ahead and add that and modify the way you want it, right? So in my case, say I want to add some private public claims, I want to add some authorization roles and all of that. So you can dump all whatever else you want to put in there. Now let's go back and try and figure out what exactly is happening over here. So I am extracting the date in current millisecond, and then I want to add the oh, I see. I think yeah, I think I made a mistake of closing the bracket over there. So I fixed it. I had moved it outside. So this is how it was earlier, and this is how it is supposed to look like. Okay. So wrong one and the right one. So if I'll just copy paste so that it makes sense what I did mistake. I'm supposed to be adding that time inside the date method right over there, right? Okay, so we have fixed this, and now we have all the methods that we need for our JWT. So let's go back quickly and check. So we have validate token. We are extracting the username from the JWT token, and we are generating the token at this time. Okay, so everything looks good. So let's go ahead and create our authentication filter class. Okay, so remember, whenever we are adding filters, we have to create a filter and then override that, so that whenever a class, whenever request comes in, it goes to multiple filter, and we have to make sure that from one filter it moves to this second filter, and so on and so forth, right? So just like we created the filters earlier in the database or authentication, we're going to add auth token filter, and this one is going to be using once per request. So we're going to be extending once per request filter, and it'll ask us to override a method. So we are going to be do filter internal. Make sure that towards the end you also say that move on after this, right? Go to the next filter. So we will need all the methods that we've created earlier, right? In the in our utility class, the private JWT, and I've added and all our constructors, so it should be provided. I think we should have provided as a auto wired, because we may have to re-inject these as a bean in the configuration, right? So let's leave it for now. Let me just fix the lines over here so that it is easily visible in a single screen without scrolling for me. Okay, so here what do we need to do? We first need to get the token. So now imagine the request has come in and it has come to this filter. What do we need? We want to get the token from the header and validate the token. Okay, then we have to make sure that if everything looks good, we are actually going and putting that in our security context holder as well, and we are going to add our SLF4J class, right? So I'm again going to put in an information object over here calling the auth token filter for the given URI. So I'm just going to extract the URI from my HTTP request. So here I've added the placeholder request dot, I think it's called get request URI. Yep. So I got the URL, I logged it in, and now let's get the token from the header. And for that, what do we need to do? We need to simply go ahead and create a variable and use our JWTs to get the token value, right? So we had the JWT and the method was called get JWT details from the header, and over here we are simply going to provide a request class. So HTTP, sorry, not the request class, HTTP servlet request class. So we have the value as request, and now we have added that, and we need to make sure that if the JWT token is not empty, so we're going to add all of those good validation checks over here. If the JWT token is not null, and the we are able to extract the value, right? And that value is going to be coming in our method. So what is that method name? Let me look it up. So it's JWT token dot. Why is the value not coming up? Oh, I see. I put it as JWT token. It should be JWT util, right? So from the JWT util, we need to make sure that the token is valid. Token is not null, and that the token is valid. Remember, we added that method over where it was looking at the signing key and making sure that token is valid. Okay, so now we have the token. Now we are ready to extract the values from the token. So what we have to do, we have to extract the username, and then we have to get the user detail object and username, roles, and all the good stuff, right? Which means that we need to make sure that these values are extracted. And why are we pulling it from here? Because we have to set it up in a security context holder. So remember, you got the values from the token, and now you want to make sure that it is added in your security context holder. Otherwise, how will you know that a user has been authenticated if it moved from one page to other, right? So first you're going to manually set the security context holder. So I'm going to just comment it out. So again, I'm putting my thoughts down here so that you know what exactly is happening, right? So we got the username, we got the user details object, and we are going to manually set the token in the security request holder. Okay, and then when the user is authenticated, we are going to update the value. We're going to set the context. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the username. So we're going to get username, and here we are trying to get the username from the user detail service. Okay, load by username. So we are making sure that everything is good. So I'm going to be over here, I'm going to be using user. What is the value that I'm looking for? I'm looking for the username, right? What was the username I extracted? So let me take a look at this. So we are doing load by, oh, sorry. That's not what I'm supposed to. So over here, I'm going to remove this. Okay, so jot util dot, we have to extract the username from the token. And I don't like, oh, it looks like I misspelled the method name over it. So I'm just going to change this to JWT, not HWT. So let's go ahead and update the method name over here so that we don't get an error. All right. So fix that. And now we are going to be extracting the username from the JWT token value, right? So we validated it. Everything looks good. And now we are extracting the value of the username. And in our user detail, remember, what does user detail contain? It contains a detail of your username, password, authority. So if you're going to be creating a brand new JWT token, right? This is the place, this is the object that is supposed to hold your username and password. So here we are saying that user detail dot load by username. So what this is going to do is, because the data is valid in the token, right? We are not validating the username from database. We are saying that for this username, get all the authorities, that is the roles that are associated with that. So now I have the user detail object. So the methods will go, the roles will go in the authorities, and I want to now access that. Now why do I need to access that? Because I need to put them in my username password authentication token, because this is the value which you have to set in the security context holder, so that when we are moving from page to page, this value is actually present in the security context holder. Okay, so here I have the I'm going to put the value of user detail. I'm not going to put any credential over here. And now we have to put the authority. So user details dot authorities. So this authority is coming from the previous line, line number 36, load by username. So it'll pull in the usernames. Say the username is John. The roles associated with that is employee. So it's going to load that particular value, right? So we have added this, and I think I misplaced my semicolon somewhere. Let me fix this first. And okay, I'm going to put this semicolon over. Okay. So now user is authenticated. I have created the authentication username password authentication token. So if this thing is not getting clear, hey, what is the username password authentication token? Remember, you can always go back and look at the Spring documentation. I tried to best explain that in your security context folder, it holds your authentication token over there, right? So now first I validated, then I extracted the value, then I got the detail from the database. Hey, what are the additional information associated with that, with this particular user? I created the authentication token, and I am setting in the security context holder. Otherwise, I'm putting in the if the token is not valid, I'm simply going to log the value JWT token seems invalid. Okay. And that is all. But this is once per request filter, so I need to make sure that the code move from filter to filter, right? So first filter is done. What am I supposed to do now? I'm supposed to tell that continue in the filter change. So if there are any more filter, I am saying that go ahead and continue, and the request and response objects are part of that method signature. So this took care of my user who is supposed to be authentication with a token because he has used his username and password, right? What about users who want to create a token using their username and password, because this is the first time they're logging in? So for that, we have to create a another control class for logging in, right? So let's go ahead and create the request and response object. So I'm going to create a login request object, and we're going to use Lombok over here. And this is supposed to contain a username and password, just two of the values, username and password. And whenever a user provide the username password as a login request, that here's my username password, make sure if it is valid, then give me a token back, right? So in the login response, what are you supposed to see? You're not supposed to see a password in there, right? You need three values. Right now we are using three. You can pass as many other thing you want to print out. So for us right now, we want a username to be returned, so that when we are reading it, right, we are human, we want to see what the username looks like. We don't want any random token. So we are going to be first returning the token, that a token has been created. Here's your token. We're going to be returning the username, and we also want to return what sort of roles that user has. Roles, authorities, these are the term which you'll see getting interchanged when we're talking about security. So I'm for to make things simpler, I'm simply going to refer them as roles. But in Spring security context, these are called authority. Okay. So I have login request and response. Now I'm going to create a controller, and the controller for allowing user to log in, because in an employee control class, it only has information about whether user can see the employee list, add and remove it, right? We still need another controller, so we're going to separate it out into a different class called login control. Let's call this JWT controller. We're talking about JWT, so we're going to keep everything named JWT. Okay. And here we have to create a annotation rest controller, and we're going to make it all args, because we have to make use of our authentication manager. Remember, if you haven't seen the how that database authentication happens, right? Because over here you are going to be providing the username and password, and you need authentication manager. Define that you want to use a simple provider manager, which will make use of user detail, which will make use of user detail service and all of those, right? So we have to get this authentication manager that is going to direct how the authentication is supposed to happen in the flow. I know it looks like magic when you're using Spring, but Spring actually helps you to minimize the code that you want to write, right? So we're going to add the post mapping, and in that we are going to be saying that if I'm going to be calling with a URI that starts with /authenticate, then you are going to be providing the login request, and the value that is supposed to be written is login response, and they're both going to be the providing the response back in a JSON format. So I've added consumes and produce and put in as media type as application JSON value. You can also hard code the value as application slash JSON if you want, but these are some hard code, these are some standard strings that are provided out of the media type classes, so you don't have to type all of that, right? So now I'm going to be providing a response entity. So if you see, there's I've added a question mark. I haven't provided as a login response, and the reason is you will be getting two type of scenarios. One is that your login request was successful, another is your login request was unsuccessful. So when it is unsuccessful, I want to provide a error back. And remember, in our previous video, we created the exception on how to catch exception when login issue happen, when the authorization issues happen, right? Because those issues are not going to be caught by your controller classes, they happen in the filter side, right? So which is why I have to provide an error, and that will be used by my authentication filter class whenever exception happens. You can go back and see how we wrote that, or you can just look at the code. Okay, so let me add this authentication. So okay, so now what I want to do, I want to say that authentication manager dot authenticate new username authentication token, and I'm going to be passing the login request dot username and password. These are the two values that are coming in as payload, and I'm authenticating it and passing it as a username password authentication token. Okay, remember, if you now, I think it'll make sense to you why we try to create username password authentication token manually when we are trying to validate the token. Because when you're doing that, that value is going to be empty, right? You have to provide that so that it can be set in the security context holder. But over here, authentication manager is automatically going to add it into the security context folder. So you won't see me putting that values over here. Okay. So the first thing which I'm trying to do is, if it is valid, good, set the value in authentication. Otherwise, there are different type of exception can happen. That is disabled exception. That is somebody tried to log in multiple times and you chose to disable the user for say 1 day or permanently until they come back and look at a code or click on a link so that it can be enabled again. And I'm going to be putting in a message over here. I'm going to create an error map that it should say that the status is unauthorized, or sorry, status is actually false, and that it's a invalid exception. You can put in whatever error you want. So I'm just putting standard value. I just want to copy paste and move on quickly. Okay, so here I'm saying that return response entity as an object of error map. Now it will make sense why there's a question mark, because I'm trying to send two different type of values. Otherwise, if I would have tried to do it without the question mark, it would have given me an error saying that, hey, I'm expecting a login response type while you're sending me an error map. So which is why we provide the generic question mark over here. And the second one could be that user provided a wrong username and password. So we're going to add this, copy paste this value as is, and just going to be editing the messages in the error map. So over here, I think I made the HTTP status invalid, right? You have to be, let's change this value. I think HTTP status also has to be updated. So I'm going to be putting as account is disabled over here. Okay, and let's make sure that everything else looks good. And for both of these, I'm providing HTTP status as unauthorized. Actually, there is another status. Let me quickly check that. Locked. Yep, that my account is locked, right? Because it has been disabled. There are multiple statuses. You can do a dot and see what all statuses are available, and you can do that. Now I'm ready to put it into a security context folder that my authentication is valid. And when I put this authentication value, right, so now authentication has the information about user password authentication token. So I'm simply going to be setting this set of authentication that will have information that, hey, your token, your username password is valid. I'm setting that value in my security context holder. Okay, so now I'm going to authenticate at this time. Authenticate username and password. So far what we are doing is we are simply saying that I'm going to be taking this particular username password, putting it in the security context holder, and now I want you to look up in my database that whether this value is valid or not. Otherwise that security context holder will have that value that, hey, this is the value you had passed me, and the username password authentication token is invalid for me. So here I'm doing a simple select star from users. Here is the username, where username equal to this and password equal to this. If it is invalid, you will get that. If not, then you're going to get that value back. Load by username will pull all of your um, authorities and everything else, right? So if username is found, we will then try and create the token for that. And that is why we had added to import the inject the jot utils, right, in line number 28, if you see above. So here we're going to create the token, and we are just going to use the generate token using user details. And we got the roles because this is one of the values which you are going to put in, going to pass in the in our response object. So login response has three value. One is jot token, second is the username that we have, so we can pull that from the user detail got username because it's a valid one. And then we are going to be passing the what was the third thing we wanted to put in roles. Okay, so we have the value of the roles over here. So now we have the easiest part. We have to wire this in our security config, right? So we wrote our control classes, we have our auth token filter, and now we need to make sure that this auth token filter is called somewhere in our flow, right? So for that, we have to add couple of bean. We have to add our auth token filter bean, and we have to say at what point in time will this filter should be executed. For that, we have to use our authentication man. This is the first time you will be defining authentication manager, because if you're just using JDBC or authentication, you didn't have to do anything, right? Because it was using the default provider manager, right? So let's go ahead and first add our auth token filter, and it is supposed to just return auth token filter. So our bean is created. It requires jot util and user detail service. We can inject, we can create two more bean and inject, but I think let's go ahead and fix this in the auth token filter class. But before that, let's add the second bean as well. So we're going to add our second bean for public authentication manager. We're going to add this authentication manager, and in our authentication manager, we need to provide a method. We need to provide the class called authentication configuration. This is the class where I am specifying that in my security flow, I want to use the filter that I've just created, the authentication token filter. So let's look for that class called authentication configuration, and I'm just going to name it as is authentication configuration auth config. Okay, let's keep the name a little bit small, and here I want to return that authentication manager, that I want to set the value of the auth config auth config dot get authentication manager. So it is going to return the default authentication manager, right? But I want to specify that auth token filter. So if you look at this method, it requires an exception first. So I have provided that, right? So we are providing that authentication manager, right? And now what we're going to do is we have to figure out, first fix the error of the auth token filter, where we have said that we're going to add them as a part of the constructor. Let's go ahead and change that, right? I'm little lazy today. I'll just remove this value and then create these fields as add auto wired, so that I'm not going to be creating. I want to keep it simple, guys. Clean code over there. Auto wired I rarely use. We should always using the constructors over there, and I should have created a bean, but I want to finish. I don't want to make this video long, right? So I've added that, right? So now I'm going to make a. I need to uh, put where I want to use that particular filter. So I provide the authentication manager class, and now we're going to make sure that we are making use of our authentication filter. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the change. So for that, we have to make sure that um, if it is hello, then if everything is good. Otherwise, everything has to be pre-authorized, and we have to add that the authenticate class is also available without any authorization, which is why we didn't add any pre-authorize. Because if somebody wants to access that URL and I put in a leave it as at any request, you'll say that to access this authenticate class also I need to provide a token or something like that. We don't want to add that, right? So now we have added that permit all, and now we have to add filter before. Where do I want to add that filter? I want to add authentication filter before my username password authentication filter class. So let's go ahead and start our testing to make sure that our code is working fine. So let's go ahead and start this application. Right, so my application has started, and let's open my Postman, and over here I want to use a authenticate. So remember, I don't have the token right now. So first I want to go ahead and add that, and I'm going to make this authorization as no auth, and I want to provide a JSON for username and password, a JSON payload, right? So I'm just going to copy paste username Larry, and I see that there is an error. Let's take a look at the error. So according to this, you would see an error that it is not able to serialize. So this is happening because I'm missing a dependency for jot Jackson, JJWT Jackson.jar. Okay, so we have to go ahead and add this file. You can use Jackson or you can use JSON. So we need to add one more dependency for Jackson over it, so that conversion can happen, right, for the serialization over there. So let's go ahead and copy paste as is, and we are simply going to replace the value of JJWT. The version number is exactly the same. I already checked it out. So I'm just going to replace this value over here, and we will rebuild the code or just restart, and this should fix my issue now. Okay, so let's restart the application. Okay, my application has started, no issues, and fingers crossed everything should look fine. So there you go. So I got my token, and I got that username is Larry, role is employee, and manager for Larry. So John is my employee, Larry is my manager, and Mary is the admin. Okay, so now I can use this token to get my employee, post employee, update employee, right? So I'm going to be replacing the bearer token over here, and you can see I can get the value. But let's see, so we had to use Larry, right? So Larry should be able to get and also create new one. So yes, Larry is able to do that, but will Larry be able to delete is only for admin, and Larry is not admin. So let's try and make sure that he is not authorized. I should get the method that he is not authorized, right? So as you can see, it got that unauthorized method. Now we need to make sure that who is able to authorize this. So let's put a wrong username password. Let's do one more validation, right, for creation. So you'll see that it gives me invalid credential because we don't have a username who is Mary. It's Mary. So we're going to change that over here, and we're going to create a new token for Mary. So we created a token, and you can see she has a role of admin, employee, and manager, and Mary should be able to delete that. So let's see what we had seen, right? So we posted that and I got the values, but it is saying that it's invalid because I need to put in my secret key. Okay, so I'm going to put this secret key, and now you'll see it'll become as signature is valid, and you can see these are the value which are part of the token. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and check whether Mary is able to delete it or not. Okay, so I'm going to change this. Let me copy it again. Oh, looks like it didn't get copied. Ooh, Fat King. Okay, let's copy one more time, replace the value, and you will see that employee is now deleted. Okay, so I can see my tokens are working, but now I also want to make sure that these tokens are actually expiring. So let's reduce this number. Okay, so right now it was 36 second. Let's make it 10 second. Okay, so I have to be quick here because as you can see, I've been fat king a lot. So let's go ahead and create a sorry, my last token was valid for longer time, so I'm just going to create my token one more time. So this token is should now be valid only for 10 seconds. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that, replace it, and yep, and you can see that I'm getting an unauthorized error over here, and you'll see that token seems invalid because it has expired. I think I put in a wrong message out there. It should be saying that it has expired. You can go ahead and fix that, but my goal is to show you that token has become invalid. Okay, so if I create the token one more time, I'll go and try and replace it again. You will see that it is I'm able to hit it as many times as the token has not expired. Okay, so as you can see, the token has now become invalid. It's unusable. So if somebody has stolen your token, you are safe now because that token can only be used for 10 seconds. So depending on your need, you can pick up how long you want the token to be valid. Okay, so as you can see, I'll show you one more time that token has become invalid. Okay, and in the error log you'll be able to see that 10 second has elapsed. So let's take a look at the time over here, right? And if I see the last happy path, which I think I should have cleared everything and redid this, but you can see that it has started showing up after 10 second. Okay, so if I go all the way up, you can look at the time. So 10 second has little over 10 second has elapsed,